Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I met him at a time when I thought I had everything figured out. I had just come out of a rough patch, and he seemed like a breath of fresh air. He was charming, funny, and always knew how to make me feel special. We had these long conversations that would last hours, the kind that make you believe in fate. The connection felt so real, so intense, I couldn't help but think I had finally found someone who truly understood me. Every moment with him felt like the start of something beautiful, but I couldn't have been more wrong. At first, it was small things I could easily dismiss. Late nights at work, strange phone calls he would take in private, his tone clipped and guarded when he hung up. The way he would get jittery when I asked about his plans for the weekend, or if he was going to see his old friend again. I told myself, it's nothing. You're being paranoid. But those little things started adding up. The doubt crept in like a shadow, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, something in my gut told me I wasn't imagining things. I tried to brush off the feeling. After all, I had no real evidence, just a gut instinct that gnawed at me. But I couldn't shake the thought that something wasn't right. I started to doubt myself. Was I just overreacting? I even asked him about it once. His face went pale. He quickly reassured me, telling me I was being insecure. But that didn't ease the tension in my chest. My gut screamed that he was hiding something, but the fear of what that could be kept me from confronting him directly. I wasn't ready to face the truth.
Then there was her, his so-called friend.
She was always around. They would meet for coffee, go on hiking trips, and even talk about their deep conversations. I didn't think much of it at first. She seemed nice enough, friendly, like someone I could trust. But every time I saw them together, my stomach twisted. I never thought to question it at first, but now I couldn't help but wonder. What kind of friendship was this really? I could feel it in my bones. It wasn't just friendly, and I wasn't being paranoid anymore. Something was wrong. It was a Sunday evening. He'd just come back from yet another weekend away with her, and I couldn't keep the worry inside anymore. I asked him, "Are you sure it's just a friendship?" The way he tensed up, the way his eyes flicked to the side, something in me broke. His defense was immediate, almost aggressive. "Why would you ask me that? We're just friends." He was angry, but it wasn't just anger. It was fear. He was afraid I was starting to see the cracks. And that fear told me everything I needed to know. I began to notice more subtle signs. He'd forgotten to mention that he was meeting her again, or he'd changed plans at the last minute. One evening, I caught him texting her at dinner. I couldn't make out the words, but I saw his face change when I looked over his shoulder. A brief flicker of guilt? Maybe. Or maybe it was just a reflection of my own suspicion. He quickly hid the phone, giving me a look as if I was the one who was wrong for even noticing. But I knew. I knew something was going on. This wasn't just a friendship. It happened one afternoon when he left his phone unlocked. I told myself I wouldn't snoop, but the temptation was too great. I picked it up, just for a second, to accidentally glance at the screen, and there it was. A message from her. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you." My heart stopped. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there. But instead, I did nothing. I closed the phone and sat there, numb, pretending like I didn't see it. What could I even say? How could I trust my eyes? That night, he came home late, just like I expected. He kissed me as if nothing had happened, as if everything was normal. But my mind was racing. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I asked him again about his friend. This time, the words tumbled out faster than I could stop them. "Why did you lie to me? What's going on between you two?" His reaction was defensive, angry. "You're overreacting. There's nothing between us. I'm just trying to help her through a rough patch." I wanted to believe him, but his words didn't match his actions. The lies were becoming clearer with every passing day. The confrontation came one cold evening. I had enough. I asked him flat out, "Are you sleeping with her?" His face went pale, and for a moment, there was silence. And then he said the words I had been dreading. "It's not what you think. I didn't want to hurt you." He said it as if I should somehow understand his betrayal. But how could I? The hurt washed over me, suffocating me. The man I loved, the one I had trusted with everything, had been lying to me for months. And worse, he had been lying to my face. In that moment, the world seemed to fall apart. All the pieces I had tried to ignore finally came together, revealing the full picture. He and she had been seeing each other behind my back for months. The messages, the secret meetings, the lies. It was all there. I felt like a fool. How had I not seen it? How could he betray me with someone I trusted? It wasn't just a betrayal of our relationship. It was a betrayal of my trust in her. I couldn't believe it. I felt like everything in my life had been a lie. The anger, the heartbreak, it consumed me. I couldn't fathom the depth of the betrayal. It wasn't just him. I had trusted her too. The woman I had called a friend. The woman who had always been there for me, listening to my problems, offering advice. She had been playing me like a fool, all while pretending to be my ally. I wanted to confront her, to scream at her, to make her feel the pain I was going through. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew it wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't undo the lies or the hurt. She had chosen him over me, and that was something I couldn't forgive. After the confrontation, things changed. He begged for my forgiveness. He cried. He promised me he'd cut ties with her, that it was all a mistake. But I could barely look at him. The trust we once had was gone, shattered beyond repair. I shut him out. I stopped speaking to him for days. I didn't want to hear his excuses or his desperate pleas. I wanted space. I needed space to process the enormity of what had happened. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed all the signs? The pain was almost unbearable. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, the man I loved, and the woman who had stolen him from me. I felt so stupid, so worthless. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was crushed. Every ounce of strength I had once felt in this relationship vanished. I doubted myself, questioned my worth. Why wasn't I enough? Why did he choose her over me? The questions swirled in my mind, drowning out everything else. I thought about leaving, but I couldn't even fathom what life would be like without him. As days passed, more of his lies came to light. I found things in his apartment, things that didn't belong to me. A ring that wasn't mine. A necklace I didn't recognize. They were pieces of her, remnants of their affair. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Everything I thought I knew about him, about us, was a lie. He had created a version of our relationship that suited him, one where he could lie and cheat without consequence. And I had been living in it, blind to the truth. I felt empty, like a shell of who I was before all of this. The laughter and joy I once had seemed so far away. It felt like the world had turned gray. I didn't know how to move forward. I thought time would heal the pain, but it only deepened. The weight of the betrayal hung over me like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't stop thinking about how my life had fallen apart. It was as though the future I had imagined was now a distant dream. I started to realize the truth I had been avoiding. He didn't love me the way I thought. All the sweet words, all the promises, they were just tools to keep me in the dark. He didn't care about me, not the way I cared about him. His love for me had been a mask, one that hid his true intentions. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. He never loved me. Not really. And that was the hardest truth to accept. All the years of giving him my heart, my soul, and all I had received in return was betrayal. I began to reflect on everything I had sacrificed for this relationship. I had trusted him blindly, given him everything I had. I believed in him. I believed in us. And now, all that was left was the cost of that trust, the heartbreak, the doubts, the shame. The worst part was realizing that I couldn't get that time back. I had given it all to someone who didn't deserve it. The price of my trust had been too high, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer felt like my own. There were moments when I denied it all. I told myself I could forgive him, that we could rebuild what we had. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe he really was sorry. Maybe there was still hope for us. But every time I tried to convince myself of that, the truth would rear its ugly head. His lies, his betrayal. I could no longer ignore them. I couldn't erase the images of him with her, the way he had looked at me while lying, pretending everything was fine. The denial was just another way to avoid the inevitable. It was one evening, alone with my thoughts, when the truth finally sank in. I wasn't just hurt, I was angry. Angry at him. Angry at myself for allowing this to happen. And, surprisingly, I was angry at her too. The woman who had once been my friend. I finally understood what I needed to do. I needed to take my power back. I couldn't let him, or her, control me anymore. I deserved better. I deserved someone who would love me fully, not someone who would deceive me. That moment of clarity was the first step toward healing. I knew what I had to do, but actually doing it was another story. The walls I had built up around my heart were high and strong. For so long, I had let him in, trusted him completely, and now, Those walls were my only defense against the hurt. But as I sat there, thinking about everything, I realized that I had to tear those walls down. Not for him, but for myself. I couldn't live in a prison of anger and betrayal. I had to release it. It was time to let go, to heal, to move forward. Letting go felt like a betrayal to myself. How could I walk away from someone I had invested so much into? How could I let go of the dreams we had built together? But then I thought about the pain, the deceit, the endless nights wondering if he was lying again. Was that the kind of life I wanted to live? I wanted peace, freedom, and self-respect back. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to break free. So, I made the decision. It wasn't just for me. It was for the person I had lost along the way. The one who had been too trusting, too giving. She deserved to rise again. I knew I had to confront her, my former friend, the one who had stolen my trust and my love. It wasn't just about getting closure. I needed to hear her admit what she had done, and maybe, just maybe, I get a sense of why. Why betray me? Why hurt me in such a profound way? I found her one evening, alone at the coffee shop she frequented. I walked in, and she saw me immediately, her face paling. She knew what was coming. I didn't waste time with small talk. Why? I demanded, my voice steady, but full of rage. Why did you do this? Her response was almost casual, as if she had been waiting for this moment. You don't understand. It just happened, she said, avoiding my gaze. I didn't plan it. It was never supposed to be like this. She sounded like she was making excuses, like she was trying to justify her actions. But there was no justification. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much pain she had caused me. But instead, I just stared at her, searching for some kind of remorse in her eyes. But there was none. It was clear she wasn't sorry. She didn't regret it. And that was the hardest part. As I left the coffee shop, I felt numb. The words she had said to me kept echoing in my mind. It wasn't supposed to be like this, but that wasn't enough to ease my pain. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the damage she had caused. I realized then that some people are just selfish. They don't care about the destruction they leave in their wake. I was just another casualty in her self-serving world. And for that, I felt nothing but anger. I had spent too much of my life believing in people who would never give me the respect I deserved. That was the coldest truth. Healing wasn't immediate. I didn't wake up one day with everything fixed, with my heart fully healed. It was a process. There were moments where I thought I couldn't make it. There were days when I missed him so terribly, I couldn't breathe. But those days became fewer and fewer. Slowly, I started rebuilding myself. I focused on me, on what made me happy, on the things I had neglected. I reconnected with friends, people who truly cared about me, who had always been there. I started to trust myself again. It wasn't easy, but I began to realize that I was worth more than the lies and the heartbreak. One day, I was sitting in the park, just watching people walk by, when it hit me. I had survived. I had been through the worst pain of my life, and yet here I was, still standing. I hadn't broken. I had become stronger, more aware of my worth, of my strength. That moment, sitting there alone, I realized that the person I had been before all of this, hurt, betrayed, lost, wasn't who I was anymore. I had grown, and though I couldn't erase the past, I could make a new future. A future that didn't revolve around his lies, his betrayal, or her selfishness. It was time to say goodbye for good. No more phone calls, no more messages, no more running into each other at mutual friends' gatherings. I had to sever all ties. The last time I saw him, I looked at him, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel anything. No love, no anger, just emptiness. I told him everything I needed to say, that he had broken me, that I would never forgive him, and that he didn't deserve another moment of my time. I left him standing there, and as I walked away, I realized something incredible. I was finally free. Months passed, and I didn't think about him as much. I began focusing on the future, on the life I was creating for myself. I started new projects, met new people, and began to remember what it felt like to be happy again. But there were moments, quiet moments, when I thought about him, about what we had. It wasn't regret. It was just an unfinished chapter, a part of my story that I couldn't erase, no matter how hard I tried. But it wasn't my focus anymore. I was writing a new chapter, one where I was in control, and that felt powerful. It was in the quiet of the night, alone with my thoughts, that I truly understood what had happened. I hadn't just been through heartbreak. I had been through a rebirth. I had been tested in ways I never expected, and yet I had emerged stronger, more resilient. I was no longer the woman I had been before. I was someone new, someone who had learned to love herself first and foremost. I wasn't going to let anyone diminish my worth again. The future was mine, and I was going to embrace it with open arms. I had come a long way since that day when everything fell apart. The woman I was now wasn't defined by the lies or the betrayal. She wasn't defined by the pain or the heartbreak. She was someone who had learned from her past, who had picked up the broken pieces and turned them into something stronger. She was someone who no longer feared the truth, no longer feared being hurt. She was free, and she was ready to take on whatever life had to offer. Because now, she knew the most important lesson of all: her worth was never dependent on anyone else. It was months after everything had ended. I had started a new life, embraced new opportunities, and rediscovered parts of myself I had long forgotten. One day, as I was walking through the park, I saw him. My heart skipped a beat, and for a split second, I felt a rush of all the emotions I thought I had buried. He looked different, hollow, almost, but he still had that look, like he wanted something from me. The worst part? I could feel a tiny flicker of curiosity. I had to remind myself, no, he didn't get to affect me anymore. I wasn't his anymore. He approached me slowly, his footsteps tentative. "I know we haven't spoken in a while," he began, "but I need to apologize. I've been living with so much guilt, and I've realized how much I hurt you." I could feel my stomach knot, every inch of me screaming not to listen. "You broke me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And your apology won't change what you did." He looked at me with those same pleading eyes, but I was done with that. I didn't need his apology. What I needed was to move forward, and I wasn't going to let him distract me from that path. He tried to explain, to make excuses once more, but this time, I wasn't interested. Every word he spoke only reinforced the truth. I had been right to walk away. It wasn't about his guilt or his attempt to fix things. It was about me, my peace, my future. In that moment, I felt a surge of power. I was free. I didn't need closure from him. I had already found my own closure in the journey I had taken. "I've already healed," I said firmly, and I meant it. "You no longer have a place in my life." The finality of those words gave me a sense of peace I hadn't known in so long. As the days passed, I felt lighter, freer. Saying no to him, rejecting his attempt to pull me back into the toxic cycle, felt empowering. It was like I was shedding the last remnants of the past. Every time I resisted the temptation to answer his calls, to meet him for coffee, just to talk, I became stronger. I realized that saying no wasn't about being cruel. It was about protecting myself. It was about reclaiming my boundaries and saying, "I am worth more than the pain you caused me." I wasn't just moving on. I was thriving. Over time, the weight of forgiveness became clear. It wasn't for him. He didn't deserve my forgiveness. But forgiveness was for me. It was a way to release the hold he still had on me, even from a distance. It wasn't an easy process. There were moments when I still felt angry, still resented the way he had treated me. But little by little, I learned that forgiving him didn't mean excusing his behavior. It meant releasing the bitterness that kept me tied to the past. It meant choosing peace over anger, freedom over regret. And when I truly forgave him, I felt lighter than I ever had before. Looking back now, I realized that the hardest lessons were the ones that shaped me into who I am today. I had learned the importance of trust, but also the importance of self-respect. I had learned that love isn't about sacrifice. It's about mutual respect, care, and honesty. I had learned that no one is worth losing myself over. And most importantly, I had learned that I was enough, just as I was. The woman I had become was not just stronger, but wiser. And though the past had its dark moments, it had taught me everything I needed to know to build a brighter future. As time went on, I opened my heart to the possibility of love again. It didn't happen overnight, But slowly, I allowed myself to trust again, to believe that not all relationships were destined for betrayal. I met someone new, someone who saw me for who I truly was, someone who didn't try to change me or make me feel less than. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it felt right. And that's when I knew that I had truly healed. I wasn't rushing into anything, but I was ready to love again, on my terms, with someone who respected me fully. The new relationship was different. It wasn't about rushing things or hoping it would fill the void left by past heartbreak. It was about two people getting to know each other, slowly, patiently, building a foundation based on trust, communication, and respect. Every time I looked at him, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey that had led me here, for the strength I had found within myself, and for the new chapter one was about to begin. This wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about using everything I had learned to create something even better. One day, as I sat with him, laughing over something silly, I realized something incredible. I was finally happy, not because of him, not because of anyone else, but because I had learned to find happiness within myself. I had found peace after all the chaos. I had found hope after all the heartbreak. Life had taught me that even in the darkest times, there's always a light waiting to break through. And now, I was living in that light. I had come full circle, from a woman broken by betrayal to a woman reborn with hope. Looking back at everything, I felt a quiet pride. I had endured the worst of life's tests, but I had also come out stronger, more confident, and more self-assured. The woman I had once been, naive, trusting, vulnerable, was still a part of me, but she no longer defined me. I had evolved into someone who understood the value of self-love, the importance of boundaries, and the strength that comes from overcoming pain. I wasn't perfect, but I was whole, and in that, I found my peace. The woman I was always meant to be was standing right in front of me. There are days when the past tries to creep back in. Old memories, familiar feelings, whispers of what was once mine. And on those days, I have to remind myself how far I've come, how much stronger I am now than I ever was then. The past doesn't define me. It's merely a chapter. Sometimes, I hear his voice in my head, urging me to doubt myself, but I no longer listen. I've learned to recognize the echoes of the past for what they are, noise. I've learned to tune it out. It's a process, but every time I do, I feel the grip of the past loosen just a little more. Creating space for myself has been one of the most liberating things I've done. After years of living for someone else, trying to fit into their version of what I should be, taking time to focus on who I was and what I wanted has been incredibly freeing. I started small, an evening of solitude, a weekend spent on my own. I didn't have to answer to anyone. The more I spent time with myself, the more I began to appreciate the person I had become. I realized how much of my energy had been consumed by others in the past, people who took from me without ever giving anything in return. Now, my time was mine to spend however I wanted. One day, while flipping through old photographs, I stumbled upon an album from a trip I'd taken years ago. A trip I had once cherished but had almost forgotten in the wake of everything. Looking at the pictures, I felt a flood of emotions. Joy, laughter, and even a bit of nostalgia. It was like rediscovering a piece of myself that had been lost. The woman in those pictures wasn't worried about betrayal or heartbreak. She was carefree, adventurous, excited about the world. That woman was still in me. She had just been buried under the weight of pain and disappointment. But she was back now, and I was determined to honor her. In the past, I had lived in a constant state of uncertainty. Was he being truthful? Was he hiding something from me again? My days were full of fear and doubt. But now, I was free. I woke up each morning knowing that no one could control my peace anymore. I could go out with friends, travel when I wanted, and focus on my goals without fear of being betrayed. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The air felt lighter. My life was my own to live, and I wasn't going to waste it second-guessing my worth. I was ready to take it all in and enjoy every moment. As time went on, I allowed myself to connect with people again. But this time, the dynamic was different. I wasn't looking for validation from others. I wasn't seeking approval or trying to fit in. Instead, I was drawn to people who shared my values, honesty, integrity, and respect. I met new friends who didn't expect me to be anything but myself. And the more I connected with them, the more I realized how much I had missed real, genuine relationships. People who didn't want to take from me, but who offered their time, their hearts, their energy in return. It was refreshing. And for the first time, I felt like I was building something real. I had learned the hard way that love isn't about sacrifice or giving up everything for someone else. It's about mutual respect and growth. Love should elevate you, not tear you down. The idea of a perfect relationship was something I had once clung to, but now I saw it differently. Love, in its truest form, was messy, imperfect, and real. It wasn't about finding someone to fix your brokenness, but about two whole people coming together to create something beautiful. And as I began dating again, I knew I was ready for this new kind of love, a love built on trust, kindness, and mutual understanding. No games, no lies, just the truth. Opening up again was hard. The walls I'd built around my heart were sturdy, and I didn't know if I was ready to let them down. But as I spent more time with someone new, I realized that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was strength. It was trusting someone enough to show them the real, raw, unguarded parts of yourself. It wasn't easy. There were days when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was making the right choice. But slowly, bit by bit, I let him in. And with each step, I felt stronger, more confident in my ability to love without fear. I wasn't letting the past control me anymore. I was creating a new story. As I reflected on everything, I was proud of the woman I had become. I had moved on, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. The years of heartbreak had not been for nothing. They had shaped me into someone who understood her worth, someone who had learned to stand on her own 2 feet, to take control of her own happiness. And though the past would always be a part of my story, it no longer defined me. I was no longer looking back. I was looking forward, to the possibilities that lay ahead, to the life I had yet to fully live. At the heart of everything, I rediscovered the most important love of all, love for myself. I had spent so many years searching for love in others, thinking it would complete me. But now, I knew that love couldn't come from anyone but me. I had learned how to be kind to myself, to honor my own feelings, and to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made along the way. I wasn't perfect, but I was enough. And that was something I had to remind myself of every single day. I was worthy of all the love I had given others, and more. As I sit here now, I can honestly say that the worst is behind me. I've been through so much, betrayal, heartbreak, loss, but I'm not defined by any of it. I'm defined by my resilience, the strength to rise after every fall, to keep moving forward no matter the obstacles, and to embrace the future with hope and confidence. Life may throw challenges my way, but I know now that I am capable of handling anything. Because the woman I am today is not the woman I once was. She is stronger, wiser, and ready to take on the world. And nothing can take that away from me.